gracious. Alrighty, at this point, I'd like to invite Dr. Nancy Fan and the first panel and moderator to come up to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. In recognition of time, I'm just going to make my comments while the panel comes up here. I went that way because apparently there's difficulty with steps this way. That was a lot easier. I am Nancy Fan, Chair of the Healthcare Commission, and I appreciate everyone's time this morning for today, all day, to talk about this important issue. First of all, I do want to make a shout out to the Planning Committee and Tim Gibbs for inviting all of us and putting this forward, as well as all the attendees and speakers for taking the time to do this. I also want to do a shout out to Dr. Washko regarding the crisis in women's health services. I am a full-time practicing OBGYN in the state of Delaware, and yes, it is tough. It is very, very tough right now. I want to do a shout out to the Planning Committee for prioritizing primary care, both in the handout and in the topics they've chosen. Primary care is the backbone of a healthy, sustainable delivery of good health care. And as Chair of the Healthcare Commission, we have tried to move that forward in all various initiatives, including the Primary Care Reform Collaborative, our Healthcare Workforce Subcommittee, of which the two chairs are here today, Dr. Kathy Matt and Secretary Geisenberger, as well as in our various loan repayment programs. Once again, this is a work in progress. I'm hoping that we're able to come away with just a couple of nuggets of answers to be able to help both our crisis and sustainability. Last comments I would like to make is well, actually, I'm going to introduce the moderator, Dr. Salam here. Dr. Salam is my pleasure to introduce her. She is a board-certified internal medicine physician who received her MD from University of Pennsylvania Perelman School of Medicine and her MBA from the Wharton School of Penn. She has focused on medical education early on in her career, including being Vice President of Education for the American College of Physicians, of whom she is a fellow. And she has, throughout her career, throughout her leadership positions, in various roles at various healthcare systems, try to advance education within the healthcare systems, working on population health, value-based models, use of data regarding patient experience. Currently, she's the Chief Learning Officer at Christiana Care, and she prioritizes her education, medical education, and continuing education for the 14,000 employees regarding such things as advancement in clinical care, quality, and safety, as well as regulatory requirements. On a personal note, I happen to know Dr. Salam because Delaware is a small state and our kids go to high school together. So it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Salam as a moderator.
Thanks for that lovely, lovely introduction, Dr. Fan. Yes, our kids are in classes together, and her son and my daughter play on the same high school baseball team. Let that sink in. I love it. So, fellow DACA mom to each other, thank you. It was a lovely introduction, but I am so excited to be with all of you here. I am really amazed at the breadth of representation in the room and the sheer number of all of you, and best wishes to those of you who are watching from home. Recover quickly. Special thanks, let me echo what I know everyone has said and is feeling, which is thank you to the Delaware Health Force and all of your co-organizers and champions for this event, and especially to our friend Tim Gibbs. You put a lot of work into this. We're happy to be here. So my panelists and I want this to be a dialogue, which means we want to speak to you and hear from you. So start collecting your reflections and thoughts. We collectively decided we're going to leave a lot of time for Q&A, which we really mean discussion and dialogue. So there are microphones. We fully expect to see you lining up. We want to hear from you. So start getting those thoughts together. It's really lovely to have had that introduction by Dr. Washko. She set the tone so beautifully for this panel discussion and, of course, for the rest of the day. So we, well placed in the morning, we're going to be talking about the supply that she led off with in her slides, the supply of healthcare professionals. So our goal this morning is to reflect on the complexity of the education and training of clinicians, and that includes nurses, advanced practice providers, or physicians. In particular, for this panel discussion, we'll aim to circle around those three roles, but we do fully recognize you need every member of a multidisciplinary clinical team to provide care. We're going to talk about all the educational stages that students have to go through to aspire to these occupations, all the support that our collective organizations and colleagues provide to make that happen for these learners on their educational journey. And through it all, I want you to recognize, I know you do because that's why you're here with us today, there's always so much more to be done. We'd love to hear your ideas for how to make that happen, and to reflect on doors that you can help open or barriers that you can help remove. So let's collaborate. Let's start that through a dialogue. I've got wonderful colleagues here on our panel. They represent organizations that make significant contributions to the development of our medical providers in our home state. I'm going to introduce them in alphabetical order. I don't think you all sat in perfect alphabetical order, but nonetheless, do a little wave as I introduce you so everyone knows who's who. Dr. Joseph Deutsch, MD, is here from Bay Health, where he serves as the residency program director for their internal medicine residency program. Margaret Lafasha, DNP, is here from the Moores Children's Health, where she is the director of workforce partnership development. Brian Levine, MD, is here from Christiana Care, where he is the designated institutional official for graduate medical education. Maggie Norris Bent, MBA, is here from Westside Family Healthcare, where she's the Chief External Affairs and Communications Officer. And our Christopher Mason, PhD, is representing our host center today, Delaware State University, where he is the Associate Dean at the Wesley College of Health and Behavioral Sciences. All right, so, we've already gotten the primer. We know that there's a long educational path for students to take so they can get to the point in their lives where they can provide clinical care. Just to refresh memories, I know there's so many clinicians in the room, you can speak to this. For example, to become a registered nurse, students need a minimum of 2 years of college, and many aim for a 4-year bachelor's degree. And then many seek to advance their careers into other roles, and if they stay in the clinical realm, to become an advanced practice registered nurse. It takes another 2 to 4 years to earn a master's or doctoral degree, and there are more years of clinical experience to accrue, of course. To become a physician's assistant, after 4 years of earning an undergrad degree, students then spend another 2 to 3 years earning a master's degree before they can go into clinical care. And to become a physician, there's 4 years of undergrad education, 4 years of medical school, followed by 3 to 7 years of residency, and sometimes followed by a further 1 to 3 years of specialized fellowship training, depending on the field you want to eventually practice in. So let that all sink in. That's a lot of math. I was adding it up, and I recognized why. When I have talks with my teenager, we talk about the realities of that relatively long journey. And yes, it's fulfilling, and it takes some fortitude. That's the message I always tell mine. So not only is there the investment of time by each student, but sprinkled throughout, there's the hours and continued focus of their academic prep and study, hours and hours of hands-on practice, gaining the clinical experience that they need to accrue. There's board and licensure exams to be taken at multiple stages throughout their careers. And most of all, a successful student needs support from her family, her community, and there's a ton of practical, real-life, and financial sacrifices to make. Dr. Washko's data showed a lot of that. So let's talk about all of that in the entirety, the educational journey for our young colleagues in Delaware who are seeking to move into these healthcare professions. So I'm going to start off by asking my panel, when should we start fostering interest amongst young students, interest in and their education to start gearing them up for careers in healthcare. And I sort of thought, Margaret, perhaps I'd ask you to go first, but everybody, get your thoughts ready. The rest of the panel will chime in shortly thereafter.
Hello? Okay. Thank you, Tabassum, for that question. It is actually a very important question because, as we know, looking at our workforce and the statistics that were just shared with us, we have a national crisis and a shortage coming. So we need to start early, looking at our kids, and I say kids because they're middle school and then eventually into high school, and starting to foster their interest in healthcare. At Nemours Children's, we have, in the last probably 3 to 5 years, and I have a couple of my colleagues here in the audience with me, and former colleagues in the audience with me, who have helped to grow a program that we have, and it's our Workforce Pipeline Development Program at Nemours Children's. And it really starts with looking at children and kids in our middle schools and high schools. And what that means is we are creating opportunities at our hospital for them to come in for clinical rotations, for co-op programs, for apprentices, and then we're also creating a healthcare academy for these students. The reason this is a big deal, and for those of you who do work in healthcare, is there was always that rumor that you could not bring in students under 18 years of age. Now, earlier in the opening remarks, and I actually wrote it down because Dr. Walker did a great intro and said, you know, you need to start to be creative and think outside the box. And then also I challenge you to ask questions of your organization. So there was always this rumor that you cannot bring in anyone under 18. And so I asked somebody to prove me the language, and nobody could prove the language. And so that was a barrier that was always there, but it was a hypothetical. So once you overcome and ask the right questions, get the right people in the room, you can move forward. And so I challenge you as well to ask the right questions, get the right people in the room, and foster these opportunities for these students. Now, to influence students into healthcare, because the media doesn't do a great job. Healthcare, we think of physician and nurse, and I think that's the only career that exists in healthcare. And we all know that there's so much more than just those two roles. And until those students are able to come into your institution and see the different opportunities, do they realize that there's so much more in healthcare and what you can do. One of the things that we did at Nemours Children's, talking to the under 18 group, is we created co-op positions for medical assistants and nursing assistants. Now, these are roles that we require them to be certified. And back to what Dr. Washko said earlier, that we need a well-trained workforce. These are individuals that are sitting in our high schools right now that are well-trained. They are certified, and they can come into your hospital and be a nursing assistant or a medical assistant. And then once they gain employment, at least at Nemours Children's, they're able to get tuition reimbursement to then continue on. One of the things in our research that we found is the biggest barrier to many individuals in our communities who are specifically minority or low socioeconomic is financial, and that is why they don't go into healthcare careers. As Tabassum just said, all those years of schooling are expensive, and many people don't have those financial funding. So we needed to be creative, figure out how to bring them into our hospital, gain employment, and then create opportunities for them to go to nursing school, go to PA school, go to respiratory therapy school, etc. I will finish with this comment, because I know we have a lot of questions, but one of the things that I wanted to share with you was we just finished our first cohort of 22 medical assistant and nursing assistant co-op students. And this is across our primary care sites. We talked about primary care. Many of our primary care providers stated that they could not have opened their practices in the mornings if it wasn't for a co-op student there to be able to open the practice for them. But we graduated 22 of them, and all 22, if we talk about retention, all 22 stayed on post-graduation at Nemours Children's to continue on their employment. And then also 85% of them are enrolled in nursing school programs right now. One of the students got a full ride to Johns Hopkins. We thought, you know, Moore's being on the resume was probably a big helpful factor on that. But this individual, she's bilingual, thought it was never an untouchable realization, and so she is now at Johns Hopkins. And of all of our co-op students, 100% of them are bilingual. And so that helps our patient population because 56% of our patient population is considered, identify as minority. And so now we are starting to increase, the diversity of our applicants going to nursing school here in the state of Delaware. I will also state one more thing. Nemours Children's, if you're not aware, we also have a hospital in Orlando, Florida. And earlier, Dr. Washko said that many of these students will say, why would I want to go into healthcare when I can make more at Walmart? Well, we're dealing with that in Orlando with Disney. So Disney is paying these students $22, $23, $25 an hour to put a costume on and walk around the park and have fun. I would do that for $25 an hour too, personally. But we're paying medical assistants in Florida, the average starting salary is $16.90 an hour. That's terrible. And so from a compensation perspective, we need our wages to reflect what our students are willing to, can afford, actually, because many of them have to take 2, 3 jobs on. They don't have transportation. They don't have a way to get to work. And so the system is broken there. We need to increase the starting wages for these individuals to get into healthcare when we talk about this workforce shortage that we have. And then we continue on by fostering them to go to nursing school, PA school, respiratory therapy school, et cetera. And then that is how we start to build our workforce. But it has to start with the frontline folks, and it starts with our students that are under the age of 18 and bringing them into our health system.
Wonderful. Colleagues, that was... for those of you in the audience here, if you have similar success stories, we'd love to hear about them, especially for the under 18 crowd. I love that you just busted that myth. They're very capable, very...
Actually, our legal... Did this go off? Our legal team actually stated, and they did research, there's no federal law that says you can bring in anyone under 18. So for anyone out there, there's no federal law that says anyone under 18 cannot be employed in the health system.
You heard it. Thank you. Lovely. Maybe that's the one thing you remember today, among many things. And certainly, you've got success stories in your organizations and clinics and other areas. We'd love to hear about it in just a few minutes when I invite you to the microphones. Anybody else on the panel want to talk about their successes with our youngest professionals?
I can jump in. Let's see, this is, come on. Good. All right, here we go. So I am at Youth Westside Family Healthcare. I would like to echo what Margaret was saying. At Westside, we similarly do a partnership with different VOTEC schools across Delaware to bring in co-op medical assistants, and we've had great success. We were doing that before the pandemic, and then in earnest really made it a priority. And same success as well. It's not as, I think, robust in the amount, but certainly at least 5 to 6 co-op students, and they've stayed with us. And it's been a huge value add. One of the things that's been wonderful about it is that onboarding and training and that commitment during that year of co-opting makes them even more prepared when they're full-time. And so you get a lot of that support, and then you also have the support from the schools. And I have to give a lot of kudos to the VOTEC schools that have wanted to partner with and really kind of make that work in a very robust way. I think it's one of the key things for future conversations is how do you have equal partnership and collaboration between academics and clinical institutions.
Lovely. Please, Jeff.
Hi, everybody, and good morning, and thank you again, Dr. Salam, for inviting me to be part of the panel. One thing that I thought of with this question about fostering interest in healthcare at an early age was, are we always reaching out to the right people? So I think we typically think of people who are interested in math and science as who we want to have enter into healthcare. Healthcare is much more than that. Healthcare delivery is very much social science. Interacting with patients very much taps into the humanities. And I think that one thing I would want to bring up is that as we look at our young people and decide or try to foster interest in healthcare professions of any kind, that the people who are best at it, I think, are the ones that are most well-rounded. So as we look at folks who are excelling in history, excelling in English, excelling in language skills, these are people who also I think we should be reaching out to and really trying to determine, is this someone who could have a successful career in healthcare?
I love what you just said, Dr. Deutsch, in that, as we know, providing healthcare is a team sport, and there are so many needs, both educational and interpersonal, for every member of the team, including operational savvy, and of course, the most important thing, person-to-person communication. There's a lot we can teach each other. I love all those comments. Thank you all for getting us thinking in a multifaceted way. As I mentioned, described the path to achieving, getting ready for practice and some of the roles I described, long educational route. Common thread to all of them are the undergrad years. And they're an important launching point, those 4 years for most of us, as a launching point for graduate education, for a future career as a physician's assistant, as a physical therapist, as a nurse practitioner, and as a physician. So I'm going to ask our colleagues who are in undergraduate and graduate education, in particular, Dr. Mason, I'm going to ask you if you would start us thinking about it. Could you tell us about the holistic support and guidance that an undergrad deserves to have so he or she can achieve success?
Sure. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to DSU. I have home field advantage this morning, so I'll take advantage of it. I appreciate the question. I think it's a perfect one, especially considering I'm an employee of DSU, which is an HBCU. And so wraparound services, guidance support are really essential to our students, and they are pivotal to the success of DSU and really HBCUs across the country. Specifically here at DSU, I'm not sure if our president mentioned it, but we aim to be apologetically the most diverse and contemporary HBCU in the country. And we aim to do that by offering high quality, life-changing educational experiences that are also at a low cost, which is very important. And so the way we become great at doing that essentially starts with being deeply in tune with our students, knowing them, knowing who they are, and knowing where they come from. And so when we look at that and we are unapologetically honest with that, we sometimes realize that our students come from under-resourced environments and communities. And oftentimes they are first-time or first-generation college students. And sometimes they're both, right? And so it requires us to meet them where they are. And that means both, in many cases, financially and also scholastically. I can't think of a better wraparound support than our Inspire Scholarship that we offer to Delaware High School graduates to DSU, which is a 4-year scholarship that is, again, available to Delaware High School graduates who have at least a 2.75 GPA, fill out the FAFSA, and are eligible for federal aid. 4 years. So you can imagine how many doors that opens for students and how many doors, quite frankly, that opens for parents, family members who have the trajectory of their lives changed by somebody in their college or by somebody in their house being able to go to college. We also here at Delaware State, in terms of support outside of the classroom, have a wonderful Office of Student Success with a wonderful team of advisors who eventually become like family members to our students after 4 years here at DSU. So that's sort of generally how we do it. I don't have all day to talk about it. I could go on forever. But specific to healthcare, I want to focus just on 3 of our programs for the sake of time and because that's where most of our students who are interested in health professions live. So the first one is in the College of Agriculture, Science, and Technology. I'm not sure if Dr. Winstead is here, but Dr. Sharice Winstead is the dean there, and they house our biological sciences major and specifically the health professions concentration, which currently is where most of our pre-med students live. And to Joe's point, I want to change that. I think that we should broadcast opportunities to pursue careers in medicine to more majors outside of biology and chemistry here at DSU. But at the moment, that is where our students live, and we support them in many different ways. In 2022, Delaware State became a member institution of the Delaware Health Sciences Alliance. And so over the last few years, we've been working very closely with Dr. Omar Khan and Ms. Pamela Kreider, who are the CEO and director there, respectively, to expand the medical education resources that are available to our students. And one recent accomplishment may seem small, but it's one that I'm very proud of. Over the last couple of years, we established a relationship with Kaplan for our students, to actually juniors and seniors who are interested, to take the MCAT exam completely free. So DSU established that partnership. And so I was meeting with Dr. Khan and Pam and mentioned that. And she said, well, why don't we take it a step further, and why don't you allow us to offer scholarships to those students who complete the course to cover the cost of the MCAT exam? Offer I couldn't refuse. And so recently, that articulation agreement was executed. We have one student currently in the pipeline finishing up the Kaplan exam, or Kaplan prep course, and so she's going to be able to take the MCAT completely free of charge. And so that's important, because I mentioned low cost being a factor, and the cost of graduate exams, MCAT, is actually a barrier for some of our students to apply to graduate school and to matriculate into graduate school. So that is a huge accomplishment, and one that I'm extremely proud of. Outside of biology, we also have a very large nursing program. It's actually one of the largest, if not the largest, degree programs here on our campus. Over the last 5 years, it has grown exponentially. So in I think 2020, the enrollment was around 394 students, which is still great. But being honest, and again, that word unapologetic, there were some issues with matriculation. So most of that number represented pre-nursing majors. And we had issues as the students would matriculate. All of them would not make it into the actual professional nursing program, right? So they would change majors, which is not what we wanted. Nursing is hard. We expect not all students to make it. But as an HBCU, our mission is to look at that problem and see what we can do differently. Instead of weeding students out, we want to nurture them and give them the support that they need to be successful. So through a lot of grant funding and creativity, we've implemented what we call our launch program, and it targets students interested in nursing at the high school level, so that the table is set and they understand what the profession and the degree major will require from them. And it also follows them through the freshman year and into that summer to give them tutoring, support groups, et cetera, so that we make sure they make it past the first 2 years into the actual professional major. So we're looking to see what the data look like for that as the first cohort of that program is wrapping up, but it is exciting. And lastly, I'll close with our Masters of Occupational Therapy program, which is the only one of its kind in the state of Delaware and just happens to be at an HBCU. So I've learned since acquiring the program from Wesley College with the Wesley acquisition that the field of occupational therapy is not diverse at all. And so we want to work to change that. I think we're positioned nicely to do that, being that we are at an HBCU, so we're creating pipelines to recruit more of our undergraduate students in kinesiology, public health, et cetera, into our occupational therapy program, possibly creating some scholarships as well to recruit more students into OT. There are many other students, like I said, that have the potential to enter into health professions. Just touched on a few here at DSU, but we're doing all we can to support them and make sure that they are placed successfully. Thanks.
Colleagues on the panel, anyone want to add to that? Wonderful.
Does that work now? Yep. So, I'm Brian Levine, and I'm an emergency physician by training. I am from Long Island, so I could speak quickly, but I'll slow it down if I need to. I lost the accent about 10 years, but I would do the Philly Fanatic for free, by the way. Or Mr. Met, since I am from New York. Anyway, there's a lot of layers to digest here, and I think, obviously, I'm in the GME, the graduate medical education world, which is mostly medical students, but it also is college leading to medical school, leading to residency, then fellowship, then having the workforce stay. But I wear several hats, which includes allied health, and I love some of these ideas here. And to digest some of these layers and things such as We have people here that align. This is a small state, and I love coming from Long Island, where you're 1 in a million, or my county had 3 times the population of what the state of Delaware has. So, that's why you had to be loud and speak with your hands. Then I come down here, and everybody knows everybody. Everybody's kid goes to school with each other. And they knew me as the outsider, but I've been here, I graduated in 1998, so I've been here a long time now, and I see how the networking can occur. So at Christiana and all of Variety, I'll talk to Joe and everybody here about aligning resources to try and attract everyone, but combining and networking for the same goal. It is the scholarships. I love that. We apply for 10 to 15 grants a year from HRSA is one of them, and we get them to enhance graduate medical education, but also allied health. If you look what's going on, there are so many stumbling blocks in healthcare that are disastrous right now that you may not even feel. There are colonoscopies that get canceled because there aren't enough anesthesiologists or nurse anesthetists. We have a lack of respiratory therapists, x-ray techs, etc. So we're trying every way to attract these people in from high school and college by aligning with Del Tech, Del State, UD, Christiana, BBAI, Bay Health, et cetera. This is really important that we work together for the common goal because we're all in this together. And I will say, it's great that we're getting people in it, but I'm also seeing a larger number of people leave or do part-time or craft their life around balance, which is great, but not helpful when you need people in those positions to be taking care of patients. So there's a cultural shift that we have to adapt to as well, and it's constant adapting. You're going to hear, and I'd love to hear your ideas outside the box, but we brainstorm every week on ways we can attract new people in, keep them here, and it all starts, I agree, in middle school and high school. So we have mini medical school. We have, I run around, I come here a couple times a year to do critical skills with some of the students. I do it at University of Delaware. Little old me running around just getting a couple of people, but if everybody in this room did that, or people want to join me in some of the things that I do, I mentor college students, I mentor high school students. People just don't know. I borrowed $240,000 for medical school. It took me 20 years to pay it off. It was great. My parents couldn't pay for medical school, but it was, not a problem because I had those resources to look for, but these kids don't know where to even look. And that's what we're here for. And if we can join together and work as a team to take advantage of this small state, we can really I think we have made a great impact, but we can do even more. So I'm excited to get a little more into the granularity and the nitty-gritty, but I just wanted to overlay with that this is a youthful panel, but it's everybody in this room doing their little bit, and it makes a difference.
So you can see why I said, thank you. This is why I said yes when I was invited to be the moderator, because I knew I'd have to do very little speaking. I can hear it in your heads and in your hearts out there. I know you're thinking right along with us. And thank you, Five, for being the most eloquent panelists I've ever had to work with, so thanks. Let's keep that energy going. I love how we're identifying very starkly our students' needs. Let's be frank about them, because only by doing that can we then together come together on all the solutions. So here's something, just keeping along the learning pathway for these clinicians to be. So they've gotten through undergrad. Thank you so much for highlighting the need for extra financial and time and educational support for those. The SAT isn't the last standardized test they need to take. In every career, there's going to be many more. They need to prep for and succeed on those. And then they're into their graduate programs. Many of our students stay right here in Delaware for their training to become physician's assistants, nurse practitioners, and we have strong partnerships with regional medical schools in Pennsylvania for them to go to medical school to become physicians. Clinical rotations are the best way to keep those students connected with us here in Delaware, with our various clinical sites. And so, Dr. Levine, I'm going to ask you to kick off the conversation, but everyone else, please chime in. Talk to us about the importance of hands-on clinical education. Help everyone recognize how mandatory they are in all of these education programs. Tell us about the magic they create, and start to talk to us about why it's essential that everyone contribute to them.
Yeah, I love this because I love education and we're all educators at heart. But if, we're graduating more medical students, but there are no clinical places for them to go. We're booked solid at Christiana. We have 850 medical students that come through every year. We can't take any more. We get approached probably every year by different medical schools, PA schools, NP schools, allied health, to try and get clinical rotations. Talk to our nursing colleagues. People, they trample over each other just to get rotations. They put the pressure on the nursing student, which I think is crazy. And some of the medical schools are starting to do that. So we can put a lot of people in med school, but if you can't get them in any clinical training, we're in trouble. But we have to value that clinical training, and we'll obviously hear from everybody up here, and I know Joe does this too, but we are the educators for the future, and you have to make that experience an enlightening one where they want to come into your culture and want to stay. I love our med students. I love our PA students, our NP students, because they see what we're about. And then when they're done with their rotations, they want to come back here or stay here or work here or live here. That's our job. It is recruitment. It is marketing. It's being the best educators is the best marketing. When I have these med students that come through and say, this was a great month, I would love to train here, that is music to my ears, because if you get them to train in the GME world, or even from the UME world, the undergraduate to the graduate medical education, they will most likely stay in your area. We have 18 emergency medicine grads a year. This year we have 9 that want to stay at Christiana. That's awesome. So that's great for workforce when there's some limited specialties, and we're looking to grow those specialties. But I think your point is, Tabassum, that the education portion is your best marketing by all of us. Now, we have struggling because people will not fund educators well. Look how well they pay teachers in the world, or professors. Same thing in medical education. We just don't really find that we can encourage enough educators to be teachers and take on students, because they're now being pressured by productivity values, and their contracting makes it so rigid and stressful that they don't want somebody on their ankle, or they don't want to take the extra 5 minutes out of every 20 to talk to them about a patient they just saw. So we have to sort of change that culture, and I think that's partially our fault too. We're pushing towards how many patients can you see? We have to do, but then you're hurting patient care too. I think when you're an educator, you're a better clinician, the patients love it, and then you can attract that workforce that way. But I bet a lot of other people have ideas there. But this is critical, because if we can't get these students placed into the appropriate educational environment, they're not going to want to come. And we're already busting at the seams, and I'll be interested to hear how the other systems are, but it's a challenge, and that's something we have to overcome.
So I just want to emphasize, clinical training or education in all of these disciplines. There's a classroom component, and that, in theory, you could expand. You could build more classrooms. But it has to be coupled one-on-one, meaning one-to-one, meaning each student deserves to have their own intensive clinical hands-on experience. And they're learning. It takes them a lot of time, as it ought to. They're novices, and they're gradually gaining the experiences. And this is a setting with live patients that we want them to interact with, where we want to make sure we do not sacrifice the quality of the patient care that patient's receiving, and the safety that that patient receives as they undergo the care. So you can understand you need to have a super living learning lab to offer to all of these trainees and students, and a practitioner who's busy taking care, in the course of her daily work, taking care of her patients, has to have 2 heads, 2 areas of focus at one time. Obviously, not taking a second or a degree of focus away from the patient and family in front of her, while concurrently teaching this clinical student under her wing. You have to have 2 areas of focus, constantly watching them. You want to enable your student to learn their procedures, to get their hands-on practice, which also includes the very hyper-important skill of learning to communicate. You want to be able to observe them in action, give them enough freedom to practice, but know, when to pull them back and redirect them. I will say this very proudly, love the fact that I'm lucky to be a medical educator. Everyone here is one, and hyper-focused on supporting them. Please take that message back to where, to your organizations, your teams. Medical educators are above and beyond. So that's lesson number 2 for today. On that note, and Brian, you started to talk about, we have passionate medical educators. What do we need to do to enable them to really enjoy both their practice and educating at the same time? Anybody? I think maybe Maggie, we talked about this a little bit. Talk to me about how Westside approaches this.
Absolutely. So Westside, if I could take a moment to just share, just so we're all on the same page about Westside Family Healthcare and who we are, I think creates a lot of important context to the importance of clinical training in a community health setting. So Westside Family Healthcare is a federally qualified health center. We are one of 3 federally qualified health centers in the state. We serve statewide, and we care for some of the most vulnerable families in this state. We served last year about 25,000 patients, but the more clinicians we can recruit, the more patients we can serve. And our patients many of them live in poverty. Many are a paycheck away from poverty. 40% of our patients are uninsured, which is a really important piece of the puzzle. We know insurance is a door opener for our patients around access and care. And the care plans for our uninsured patients look very different than the care treatment plans for our insured patients because of access. Many of our patients have complex health needs that have gone without care for a very long time and have limited resources to provide that care. So it creates an environment where you are working as a team. And we talked about this earlier, right? The importance of a care team and how folks work together. The other piece that's really important in a federally qualified health center is that we care for the whole life cycle. So from a training standpoint, the students that train with us can care for prenatal patients to seniors, all in one day, right? And it really creates a really unique training environment in many different ways. And Westside in particular has 230 employees that are equally passionate about our mission and our vision to achieve health equity for all, which is really important in creating that culture that Brian kind of mentioned. The other cultural aspect that Westside has invested in is this culture of training the next generation. Since the 90s, Westside has been committed to training the next generation of health professionals at all levels. In fact, on average, we train about 80 learners a year. And just think about that for a minute. We have 230 employees, 80 learners a year are trained, from co-op medical assistants to community health workers to behavioral health counselors, physician residents and dental residents. And we are all very committed to that work. But I think one thing that was referenced is that it also takes time. It takes time and effort to make sure that those learners are having the best experience possible. So in our mind, they come back to community health, and we can have generations of community health providers in the cycle. But it also means that Westside is investing resources. And when you talk about a federally qualified health center that's also nonprofit, our revenue sources can't afford the opportunity for us to expand on those 80 learners. The demand for requests for clinical rotation far exceeds what we can provide. An example, a kind of very recent example, is from January to June of this year, we had 14 nurse practitioners, students that reached out for clinical rotations that we could not fill. 14. So because we didn't have the preceptors, we didn't have the ability to provide the training that's necessary, it is creating a bottleneck, an immediate bottleneck. This isn't a 2-3 year, this is right now. And so we have to figure out, how do we invest resources in building the clinical side of the training pipeline? And I would advocate that we need to, as much as we invest in the academic and the learning in the classroom, we need to take the same level of investment of money and time and put it on the clinical training side. And that's the only way we're going to get through this, is that we have to recognize that providers that are doing this work need to have the investment from capacity. At Westside, this looks like actually having a team that is focused on better coordination, better collaboration for learners. Right now, because we're doing it the best we can, we are splitting that role across 10 clinical providers and 10 administrators. among everything else that we're doing. So investment would allow us to do it in a more collaborative way, work hand in hand with our academic partners to make sure that the curriculum matches what they're going to learn in our exam rooms. And then the other piece is the preceptors. I think one thing that Brian touched on was the preceptors are essential. And what we're learning too is that, the goodness of heart and wanting to do this and being an educator of heart can only go so far when you're facing burnout. This idea of just one more thing, this idea of just putting, of course I want to coach and train this learner because I want them to do what I do. Everyone feels that passion. But when you are balancing complex needs of your patients and trying to teach at the same time, it's emotionally and physically draining. And I say this because I'm advocating for my colleagues that are clinicians, because I certainly am not one, but I have heard time and time again when we ask to do more from the administration side that we just can't do more. And so I think one of the really important pieces is that as we're creating this investment in clinical training, we're looking at how we can provide compensation and time for preceptors to be there. And I think that will help the response and help kind of grow the willingness of preceptors to do that work. I don't know if I went a little bit over the top on that one, but I think it's important that we equalize the investment we're making on the academic side in the classroom that we're making on the clinical side in order to get well-prepared clinicians out in the community.
Margaret, you look like you have something to add. Please.
Hello. One of the things I wanted to add to both comments, they were great. So first of all, the marketing piece, you are absolutely right. We're here because we love healthcare, and we're in healthcare, we love our jobs. We need to sell ourselves to the next generation to say, you need to come into healthcare. So I always say that every single time I go out in the community, I wear a marketing hat as well, because I'm not only trying to get people to like healthcare, but I'm also marketing Nemours Children's as a place for employment as well. But also to your point about the clinical rotation. So earlier on, I talked about the medical assistant and the nursing assistant role, and you're probably thinking, do they get clinical rotations? Well, historically at Nemours, no. And we had a high turnover of the role. So many of you who are here, you know, or maybe you don't know, and I'll educate you, the state exam for the nursing assistant and the medical assistant certification is written based on the adult patient, not the pediatric patient. So all their education that they receive is all based on the adult patient. So when they come into Nemours as a certified medical assistant, and I'm just talking about anybody, not the co-op students, but they come in as a certified medical assistant or a nursing assistant, many don't make it to their 90-day review. They're asked to leave due to poor performance, or they leave on their own because they're ill-prepared. No one really addresses the issue that they need a preceptor. They need someone to teach them how to deal with a pediatric patient. So we actually revisited, and it does take sitting down, talking to nursing leadership, talking to your administration at your facility, but we were very intentional, and we created clinical rotations and opportunities for these students to ensure their success, because they needed to understand what a pediatric patient was versus an adult patient. And one more thing I just wanted to add on to that too is that we recognize that because the curriculum, and we do go in and we vet the schools, we look at their curriculum, we look at their labs, we also see that it's all based on the adult patient, mannequins, et cetera, blood pressure cuffs, all that stuff. So we actually had some monies that were set aside through the Nemours Foundation. And I was actually approached by our chief nurse at the time that said, could you apply this money towards any of your work that you're doing? And I'm like, actually we can. And so we actually donated $20,000 to one of our local vocational high schools, and they bought pediatric equipment. And not only did they just buy the pediatric equipment, I actually had 3 educators come with me, go back to the school, and we taught them how to use the equipment. And so what a novel concept that is. Sounds so simple, right, to us, but that is one of the barriers that actually exists in our schools right now, is we need to go look at their equipment, we need to see what their education is about, and then also be intentional and create those clinical opportunities if they're not already there.
All right, everyone in the audience, we have one more prepared topic we're going to talk about, and right after that, it's your turn. So start getting your thoughts and questions together. I'll be inviting you up to the microphones in just a few minutes. So the final area we wanted as a panel to highlight is the special extra training requirement for physicians in training, and that's a residency. There are many equivalent requirements for other disciplines as well, but I wanted to take a few minutes to highlight the pathway for physicians in training. And so, Dr. Joe, I'm going to ask you to describe the founding of residency education for physicians in training that you are a cornerstone member of over at Bay Health. Tell us what it took and help us realize what it takes to sustain and grow what we in physician parlance call graduate medical education.
Thanks, Tabassum, and again, thank you for having me today. It's hard to go last. I feel like I want to comment on so many things that have been said, so I'm gonna stick to Bay Health for now, and then allow more time for discussion. So I'm a native Delawarean. I trained with Dr. Salam and Dr. Levine at Christiana Care, and in 2020 I took a job at Bay Health to found a new residency program in internal medicine. At the time, Bay Health was starting 4 different residency training programs: internal medicine, family medicine, emergency medicine, as well as general surgery. And to kind of tick on this sort of bottleneck theme, one of the reasons Bay Health was making that investment was that we wanted to recruit more physicians to this community. So how do we get physicians to come to a community and be retained there? One is medical school. We haven't talked a ton about it yet today, but Delaware does not have a medical school. I think we realize this without having said it. And the residency training programs it had were limited to the northern part of the state. So those of you who live in central and southern Delaware know that we have seen a tremendous population growth in this area. With that has, of course, necessitated the need for more physicians. Healthcare access has historically been limited and was becoming much more limited as this population influx was occurring. So Bay Health looked at this as an opportunity. Why don't we start residency training here in central and southern Delaware? Why don't we try to recruit medical students to this part of the state? Hopefully they get a good experience in our community and they want to stay long term. So I can give you a little bit of update on this. So our first residency training program started in 2021 for my program, internal medicine, as well as our family medicine program. We graduated our first classes of residents just 4 months ago. As Dr. Levine commented on, we've been lucky in the state of Delaware to retain resident trainees historically into the northern part of the state, and I can tell you we were pretty successful this first year with recruiting people in family medicine and internal medicine to also stay in Dover and the southern part of Delaware. How do we continue to sustain this? This is where I would tie into some of the things that have been sort of mentioned. We are trying to recruit people to Delaware. So I am a native Delawarean. When I grew up in Delaware, I'll be honest, I didn't think it was quite as cool as New York, but it does seem like people are much more interested in Delaware nowadays than they were 20 years ago. It's a lot cheaper to live here. People see the opportunity to go visit places like New York, but still have a property they can afford. So honestly, Delaware has become a much bigger selling point, I would say, especially over the last 10 years than it ever had been. So getting people to come here, I don't think as hard as it was in the past. I think getting people to like it here, definitely not as hard as it was in the past. People see the opportunities in Delaware to start a family, to live long term, and have a healthcare career here. They see that this is an underserved area. They see a lot of opportunity. And they see an opportunity to spend a whole career here, which I think is part of what we're talking about. But what facilitates people coming here, what facilitates all this happening? Money, it's always money, right? The Bay Health had to invest a significant amount of money to create these residency programs from scratch. It requires a lot of people. We haven't used the word yet, but I'll use it. A lot of the people are volunteering to essentially educate physicians, nurses, PAs. All of our healthcare trainees are being trained by people who aren't making a salary at all. Of course, they're making a salary as a physician, as a nurse, et cetera. But now we're just giving them an extra responsibility, which, for me as an educator, love having people, but it is still extra work. So the people that we are having train our trainee, our students, they are doing this on a volunteer basis, and this is where the sustainability piece, I think, comes in. When I came to Bay Health, one of the things that, I was trying to figure out about taking this job was, do you have the volunteers, the faculty, to be able to train residents? And I was pleasantly surprised that they did. Part of what led to me taking the job. But I will tell you that even in a few short years, most of the people who were my faculty 3 or 4 years ago are not my faculty now. Now, we've been lucky enough to recruit people along the way. Now when you have students, although people are doing this on a volunteer basis, physicians and other healthcare providers do want to be educators. They do want to work with trainees. So you can get people into your state, into your organization to do that. But you also are going to have people leave your organization. They're going to go on other opportunities. They're going to go on other things. They're going to leave the area, et cetera, et cetera. Well, you still have your residents and students there. You got to find somebody else who's going to play this role. So, this one thing I guess I would emphasize is this is a continuous circle. Anything that we did in 2021 to start a program at Bay Health, each and every year we have to kind of keep the cycle going to sustain what we're doing. So this is a constant cycle of recruitment, retainment, attraction. Some of that is within your organization's control. Some of that is obviously what's happening at the state level. If a new restaurant opens in Dover, that might be a reason why somebody actually wants to stay longer term. They see this as an area that is advantageous for them to live in. And I will also say, I guess I'll leave it with this, is one other thing I think we haven't talked a lot about, but I've seen definitely at Bay Health is our healthcare workforce is extremely diverse. This is a state that, again, the state that I'm thinking about growing up in, I did not think of it as all that diverse, but in healthcare, it's a diverse field. That's in Delaware, that's nationwide. And as we try to attract people into this area, we obviously need to attract people who are diverse, and having diverse resources obviously helps with that. So I'll stop there. I can think of a lot of other things I'd like to say, but I'm nervous enough to stop.
I thought that was excellent, and I love a lot of those points. I love being unapologetic. If you're coming to my emergency medicine residency program and joining our faculty, the culture is your teaching. That's it. You're coming in as a teacher. That's what we have to shift the culture towards, and we have to protect these people and give them FTE protective payment so that it's incorporated and they don't get burnt and leave in this constant circle. But I do want to mention the Balanced Budget Act of 1997, just for GME and physician training, capped the number of spots at each training hospital at December 31st, 1996. So Christiana had 220 residents. That's all they're going to get paid for in perpetuity. That's it. You can't really increase that number unless there was specific grant funding and or other opportunities, which HRSA and others have had in little tidbits, sprinkling out a couple of hundred spots a year. But the nation is thousands behind, and as these medical schools build, there still aren't enough training spots for American graduates at points. It can get really competitive. So to start a program takes years, and it probably took, I would say, Dr. Deutsch, 3 to 4 years to get the faculty. The funding now has to come from the system. CMS does pay for a certain number of spots, especially in new healthcare systems, but you have to apply. The accreditation through the ACGME takes at least 18 to 24 months. It's complicated, it's expensive, its infrastructure has to be built. This is not easy. You have to finance the residencies, the faculty, and all the training support. So this is a several-year process to start a program. We've started, since I've been the DIO of Christiana, 6 or 8 ACGME programs. So I'm pretty well versed in it, and I leave myself 18 to 24 months of heavy-duty paperwork to get a training of the program up and running. But you need the support of the systems to fund that. And to fund a program, if a resident costs, and we're capped out obviously at 2 whatever, and we have well over 300 residents, if you're starting a new program that has 3 residents a year for 3 years, that's 9 residents, and our salaries push them at about $120,000 with salary and benefits, times 9, you're over $1 million commitment from the hospital just on resident salaries. That doesn't include anything else. So it's a big commitment to start a program. Think about a program that you started with 4, 6, 8 residents a year for 3 years. Now you're at 24 residents. You're well over $2 million in just salaries alone. So the infrastructure and the commitment of the systems are great financially. As you were mentioning, that finance piece is very important. So I just wanted to reiterate, that's not an easy job, and that's commendable. You started 4 programs from nothing, which is awesome, and now we look forward to continued growth. So I think this is not as easy as it seems.
So just want to help you reframe what our fabulous panelists have talked about. We talked about addressing education and training shortages and growing the pipeline all the way from middle school all the way into practice and providing healthcare. I think the one thing we want to emphasize is, of course, you want to grow the entry point way upstream, more and more students of all different backgrounds, not only those who are drawn to science, but all disciplines. Welcome them in, excite them, help them meet people in practice, help them meet patients, help them visit and spend time in clinical settings, keep them interested, foster their learning. And I think an important thing to recognize is at every stage there are challenges that they have to overcome, and collectively we should know about them and then try to find solutions for them. And I also want to recommend and remind everyone, if you're going to grow the pipeline at the top end, bring more kids in, at every stage, we need to make sure we have a matching set of spots to welcome them into the next stage and the next stage. A classic example, just to wrap up what Joe was expanding on, is it's great. You heard about the number of medical students growing in the country. Thank you to Dr. Washko for those facts. We have to make sure that their next stage of training is residency. Not much you can do with a medical degree alone. It has to be coupled with residency training before you can go into practice. So let's remember to grow every stage of the learning journey so that we get what we want at the very end, which is more and more clinicians. Okay, panelists, we're going to take a little pause. We're going to hear from the audience. May I please invite you, all of you, whoever has a comment or reflection and questions, come on up. Please. We'd love to know who you are, so if you would remind us, introduce us, and then dive right in.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Tom Stevens. I'm the Chief Medical Officer at Westside Family Healthcare. And first off, amazing group. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and insights. And it's great to see a lot of familiar faces here as well today. One of the things that we've noticed, and I think that this highlights a lot of what's been brought up here, has been the difficulty with our APPs, the nurse practitioners and PAs, coming out of their training not adequately prepared for community health. And that is not a criticism at all of these training programs. I think it highlights a lot of what we've heard is that the training for APPs is shorter than physicians. Those programs are facing the same challenges that have been brought up about finding preceptors. We have, I've interviewed NPs, family nurse practitioners, that have come to us never having done a newborn exam. They're coming out of training having done, their pediatric rotation was an inpatient hematology rotation, and that was it for peds. How are they going to do family NP work? The issue with the precepting within the practice, we bring in an APP that is already challenged, and now we're having to try and train them as they're doing their new job. And one of the things that wasn't brought up is, we talked about the cost, the volunteer work of the providers themselves, but at Westside, we actually will back off, depending on the level of training that's coming in, an APP, for instance, we will often back off on the schedule of the preceptor that they're working with so that they've got more time to train that person coming in. That's an institutional cost that we don't get any reimbursement for from the schools, from any other sources. So I know that nationally there's been a movement towards developing NP residency programs and other things. I know that some of the healthcare systems have internally developed some programs. I'd love to hear from the panel about any of the sorts of initiatives that you may be doing to take folks that are coming out of their initial training and giving them that, not the physicians, because we know there's already a pathway, but giving them that extra training, helping them succeed, so that we don't have that turnover, that burn of either those new folks or the folks that are trying to train them. And if Dr. Washko is still here, I would love to, and if she's willing, I'd love to hear what HRSA may be doing to support some of those sorts of initiatives to train APPs. So, thank you.
Great questions and comments. Thank you, Tom. Brian, why don't you answer
Yeah,
that?
you bring up really great points, and we've noticed this. You would never want a graduate of medical school to take care of you on day one. That's why you have clinical training, and I'll tell you, the APC training is the Wild West. The PA schools are better than the NP schools. They're both not great, but their limited clinical experience has caused heavy burnout, and we saw a 50% loss of first-year graduates of NP school in our urgent care centers and even in primary care as well. So we started multiple fellowships. I think we have 6 APC fellowships now for PAs and NPs, and it's worked beautifully with sometimes up to 100% retention, and these guys are graduating much more experienced. But this system is not regulated that well. We're doing it as a healthcare system. I'm not sure if anybody else is doing that, but that has led to burnout and leaving medicine altogether. Here you are training your butt off. You go and you pay for NP school. You figure out how to get your own rotations, and no one trains you. And clinically, you go there and you feel like a dummy, and you're afraid of screwing up, and you're stressed, and you quit. And I bet a lot of my NP colleagues can agree that we're not setting people up for success. So that's really great points, and that's something that we're addressing at the system level, but needs to be addressed nationally, because we're losing our NPs and PAs very quickly because of that.
And you mentioned pediatrics. At Nemours, we actually just finished our first fellowship of pediatric nurse practitioners. Very intentional, grant funded, and we are in the process. I think actually they just finished the second recruitment class for that, so to address exactly what you had brought up.
We're actually working with you on that. We've got 2 of your
Oh, perfect. Yay.
Yeah.
Full circle. That's Delaware for you. Okay.
That's wonderful.
Preparedness for community health work. So our department of, well, actually it's the Department of Public and Allied Health Sciences. It includes the public health degree major. We're completing the implementation of a community health worker certificate program. So that's something that I certainly wanted to market to address that problem.
I'm going to turn to this side.
Great. Hi, everyone. Pamela Gardner with Delaware Health Sciences Alliance. Dr. Mason, thank you for highlighting the work that we're doing together around the MCAT barriers for students, particularly those with financial needs. Just a couple of shout outs of our own successes. We start at the high school level with countywide specific awareness events for students regarding opportunities and pathways to medicine for Delaware. I think it's really important to emphasize that the call to action for those that we're providing the information about the events for and asking those to spread out is really to distribute to everyone and not to those that they think are interested. We don't want to leave anyone behind, particularly those that maybe have not been loud in their interest in medicine, even if they are very successful in sciences, or those students who maybe are more on the arts or English path. We like to say that equity and awareness helps to drive equity and opportunity, and I think it's just so important. We also know that we not only have a shortage here in URM representation in medicine, but we also have underrepresented geography. And what I mean by that is that we know that students from Kent and Sussex County are going into medicine at rates much lower than those in Newcastle. So again, just focusing a lot of efforts in those counties as well. I have 2 questions, if I may. One continues to build upon the conversation around students that are coming in for their clinical rotations and educations, and how prepared they are from medical education that they've received, and how your institutions are adjusting for perhaps where the gaps are. And second part to that would be how those of us in the room that aren't in your institutions can help advocate, because why should this only fall on you? My second question is, I spent time at the Family Medicine Education Consortium conference last week, and there was a lot of discussion around across the nation, a lot of health systems moving to RVU models for physicians and attendings, and that having an impact for those interested in taking learners. And so I'm just wondering if we're seeing an impact here in Delaware, and is that a conversation we need to start having more globally, since we already have a precepting shortage? Thank you for your time.
Pam. Those are great questions. Panel, who wants to dive in? Let's tackle the first question about the preparedness of students leaving the classroom and coming into clinical learning, and adjustments, if needed, that are being done.
I think I can address that. And I'll kind of echo Dr. Stevens' point, because we're kind of his point about the preparedness. I think Pam is really key, especially for those advanced practitioners that are coming with limited clinical training. I go back to that statistic of we can't even have the preceptors to get them in for a variety of reasons. But what we've been able to do, and what we've learned this a couple years ago, and Brian is right, that the rate of burnout, we are seeing 50% turnover in our nurse practitioners, right? And that's a lot. And so what we started to do in lieu of trying to find funding to support a fellowship program, a very intensive fellowship program, which we continue to look for funding and apply, and hopefully get the added investment at some point, is we've kind of done a scale back approach. So instead of onboarding and a kind of 3 months, we're going to train you, get you in, you're going to have a full panel of patients, we have to scale back that patient panel. So that panel, they don't really get to a full panel until about a year into providing care with us. And there's just a lot of extra training and support that's needed. So that's kind of how we've had to adjust in lieu of having kind of fully trained, ready to go practitioners.
And one of the things I will add to that is those that are in residency program now, whether it's physician or nurse, they're also the product of the COVID era. So these are individuals that the soft skills. So you would ask, like, how can we help? The soft skill piece of it is really missing from many of our clinicians that we're rolling out now at a residency program. And a lot of the feedback that I find is that we are revisiting and creating content to teach our clinicians how to talk to patients and families. And so that is a big piece that we're seeing. I don't want to speak for other institutions, but that is the sector right now that we're dealing with those that are coming out of residency.
Answer to Pam's questions. One, medical education has morphed and changed to become a little bit more learning about medical communication, which was lost over a couple of years of staring at videos. And then, so medical education, they're coming in similarly prepared as we've seen them in the past, but they've changed things a little bit. So I think things are okay as they come to us from the medical schools to their clinical training. And then your other point about RVUs or productivity, when you have individuals or clinicians that have to see X number of patients per hour and get paid for such, there are a lot of systems, and Christiane is doing this now, that are doing ERVUs or educational RVUs, that you will get paid for your productivity, but you will have a decreased requirement of trying to push those patients, because we know that learners will slow you down 20 or 30%. So they're protecting them on the one end, and while paying them and or providing them extra time, and then also paying them on the other end by paying them for being educators. So we're looking at creative ways to fund this, but a lot of systems don't want to put the money where the mouth is, because they need to then turn the patients over so they get paid. So there is a little bit of a battle from both sides. So I'm interested to see, are you guys doing any of that?
Well, I think it came up a little bit earlier that then, you've got a volunteer faculty. Well, now the organization is like in this volunteer giving mode, like they're absorbing all of that, lost productivity. I mean, I agree that as an educator, I want my organization to sort of support that, but that's another, I'm marketing that to my organization. I think that they're receptive to it. But on the other hand, like, what if that tap gets turned off at some point, COVID, well, healthcare organizations lose a lot of money. Where do you think they're gonna like try to cut some costs? So like those things are always like under some threat, which again goes to this sort of cyclical nature. Like even if you thought you had everything kind of figured out with this, something else gets thrown into the loop that might limit your ability to train learners. And then the last thing I'll say the thing that maybe hasn't been said. Like I don't know that physicians are fully prepared either, like at either one of these steps. So like when we're getting medical students, do we think they're truly prepared for residency? Well, we put in systems to like help prepare them for being interns. When we have them leave internal medicine residency training, do we think they're fully ready to be a primary care physician, be a hospitalist? I don't think so. And the reason I would say I don't think so is healthcare has become incredibly more complex, and it's going to keep becoming more complex every single year. So if medical school is still going to be 4 years, if residency training is still going to be 3 years, and the knowledge base you have to build is increased by 50%, well, you're not going to learn it all anymore. So like something's going to have to kind of get cut. You just have to make sure you're cutting the right things, and sometimes, we don't. And I think that's something we just have to be cognizant of.
Dr. Fan.
Thank you. Fabulous panel, as always. Love coming to these when I can. Full disclosure, in my OBGYN hat, I have precepted medical students, 3rd and 4th years, and nurse practitioners. And it is not part of my system. I am an employed physician, second disclaimer. When I think about the challenges to being a preceptor, so, I think you guys have really laid out the course of education, medical education, whether you're a physician, nurse practitioner, or physician assistant, midwives, nurse practitioners. There is the didactic component, there is the clinical experience, there's the graduate experience, and then there's the actual, practice, being in practice. It is a lifelong learning, correct? Yeah, I think Joe just kind of pointed that out, right? It's a lifelong learning. Having said that, I think one of the areas that has been dropped, and you guys have really highlighted it well, is the preceptor, that clinical experience, right? Whether it's for medical students, whether it's for residents, whether it's for nurse practitioners. The funding for that, we come back to that. It always comes back to a little bit of cost. The traditional funders, state, healthcare systems, national government, all have budgetary concerns, all have budgetary crises, Where is the innovative, let's look outside the box, who can help us with this? And it sounds like some of you have been able to do that in your individual institutions, but I like to make things scopable throughout the state, and looking at community physicians in Lewis, in Kent County, in inner city Wilmington, who takes time, takes effort. I sit down with my medical student, I have to explain every single thing I'm doing. They know the pathophysiology behind it, big words, sorry, but they don't really understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. That takes time. I don't get paid for that. My institution's very understanding, but somebody should get reimbursed for that. Where's that innovative thinking about that funding? I'm looking at it from outside the state, because speaking for the state, there's only so much money we have, so.
Eloquently said, Nancy. Thank you so much. I do think the panelists have been, and all of you, very eloquent about emphasizing it's an investment, a necessary one. It pays dividends. We just have to be patient, and the intervening years it takes to grow the batches of highly capable and functional practitioners. We have to be patient, but we have to invest in that. And Joe highlighted why this is becoming more and more and more, and a very important point to recognize. There's so much to learn. The most diligent students in the schools with the best curricula will not learn it all. They need to learn it with you, at the front lines, at the bedside, with a patient, with you, an educator, watching and guiding and supervising and reorienting them. It all takes time and focus and attention, and at a very minimum, lots of recognition for the patient souls who teach in the classroom and at the bedside. So please recognize a medical educator every chance you get. Over here.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity and for arranging this. My name is Besan. I'm from the Center at Eden Hill. I'll highlight some of our success stories. We do have articulation with all the nursing colleges in the Vortex, except I believe University of Delaware, where we bring in students for clinical rotations. We are 80-bed inpatient subacute rehab facility, and we've seen a lot of success stories. During summer, we brought in Polytech students from their CNA program that came in as certified nursing assistants. In the beginning, it was a bit challenging because they are young kids, and most of them wanted to go to either registered nursing or med school or PA program, and I'm very proud to say that two actually of our cohort students, two are actually in the PA program, one is in the process of starting her PA program. They were able to get all the clinical rotation hours they need to actually be able to enroll in the program. And I think there is a part of the healthcare system. I do see many of my colleagues here that are, in long-term care, because many times when we hold summits like this, we focus a lot on the primary care and the acute care, and we forget the middle level, which about 17 to 23% of our population live in, and that is in our long-term care facilities and in our subacute. When we are doing that bed utilization, like Dr. Levine was talking about, the physician is looking to reutilize the bed, push the patient out, send the patient to SNF, where they go and meet an APP who is not very well prepared to handle the complexities of the healthcare needs that this patient is coming in. And what ends up happening, that patient ends up coming back to the hospital, not because they couldn't be cared for in the setting they were sent in, but because there wasn't the adequate training and the adequate mentorship, probably, to train this person who is going to meet those patients. I'm very proud to say I'm a graduate of DSU, so I am proud to say that they do have a very good nursing program, a very good sim lab. My kids who go to Nemours, I know their doctor always talks to them about, you want to become a doctor, come shadow me during summer. And he always tells them that, come be a doctor with me. So I think having those conversations even around our tables, because it changes the focus. And also there's another demographic of our clinicians that we are not talking about, our licensed nurse practitioners, our LPNs. These are people who, work at the bedside every single day, and I believe even the acute care in the hospitals, now you'll find that those are the nurses at the bedside, but then when they have to go back and do their RN program, and maybe this is somebody who has been practicing for 10 years and doing everything close to what an RN does, except maybe do IV push medications, they still have to go through the prerequisite programs. They have to go back to class and start all over to get that 2-year RN program. So what is it that we can do at a state level, and like Dr. Washko was talking about, at a national level, to ensure that these clinicians that we have, thousands of them, that we can fast track them coming from either being an LPN or coming from being a CNA to an LPN to an RN to an advanced nurse practitioner, because if you've been at the bedside 10 years practicing as a nurse, and then you go and become a nurse practitioner, you already have a lot of experience and a lot of clinical practice behind your belt. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good morning. My name is Catherine Roberts. I'm also from Nemours Children's Health. I'll get to work with Margaret, though I haven't been there quite as long as she has. I joined the hospital last year. I wanted to say some of the issues we're talking about today are not unique to Delaware, though I think you all know that. I've been in 3 states in the last 10 years, and we've been talking about the same things. Your conversation about preceptors had me writing on a napkin, because you had my brain going at such high speed, so I'll try not to repeat much of what's already been said, but One of the things I've always found interesting over the past few years, and I've been in some different roles, sometimes where I was the one responsible for placing all the students and asking people to precept. And you can imagine how well that's gone sometimes. But the people who were complaining that the students aren't coming out well prepared enough, I'm interviewing these students and they haven't had enough clinical experience, how could they possibly interview to come here when they haven't had clinical experience, were the same people saying, I can't take any more students. So we'd have a conversation about that conundrum. How do you turn this student away now to interview? You wouldn't take them to come for a clinical placement. And the reasons people wouldn't take is they would say, you know, I have so many new staff because we're onboarding so many new staff. My preceptors are overtapped. My preceptors are burnt out, and the schools will only come during the day. So we went back to the schools and said, you know, the managers are saying, whether it was nursing or respiratory or another department, the managers are saying, if you will come on an evening, on a weekend, on an off shift, they have preceptors available. And we had some schools who came back and said, okay, we're going to find a way. We're going to find clinical instructors. We will come. If you promise us you've got places, you've got preceptors, we'll come then. So those schools suddenly had more placements, and their students came back more prepared. So that was in one of the other states I was in more recently. The other things, the preceptor burnout, and we have a fabulous speaker who's going to talk to us about wellness and resilience later on. And that burnout applies across more than preceptors. Things we heard from preceptors was about recognition, the work I do as a preceptor being seen as valued, because they don't always feel that it's valued. It's just something they're asked to do, expected to do, and people don't value what they do in that role. I'll put on my nursing hat for a moment. It's not seen as valuable as being the charge nurse. And why is that? So that was a lot of feedback I've heard at a lot of different hospitals. How do you change that? Asking them what would make them feel more valued. Yes, compensation comes up every time. Compensation's a piece of it, but they've also identified other things. So please, as you look for different ways to compensate, to value what the preceptors do, bring them to those conversations. And when it's partnerships between academia and wherever the clinical site is, because I know I wear very much a hospital-based hat, think creatively, because for some preceptors, they want a menu of options. So compensation is probably part of it, but some might want to go back to school themselves. So if they precept X amount, is there a way to get X number of credits? Are there CEs they can get because they're trying to maintain all those certifications we all have? Are there opportunities? Do they have first dibs at a conference? Do they have first dibs at something else? But please bring them to the conversation, because I think often we have the conversation and we didn't invite them to the table to join us. So it wasn't a question per se for all of you, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. And Maggie, you were like in my brain as you were speaking, so amazing.
Well,
Thank
keep
you all.
keep that napkin in a very safe
Okay,
place.
I
It's the start of a lot more. That's lovely. Thank you for your thoughts and some creative ideas. I jotted one down myself. We are coming to the end of the session, but in the last 5 minutes, I invite our last two. Please come to the microphone.
Hi, everyone. Bet Wong with a group called Nurses and Neighbors. We are a community group of nurses. We all met during the pandemic because we all volunteer doing vaccination, and we came from, all of us from different states and hold license from different states. I still have my Massachusetts license, nursing license. Average number of years of experience between 30 to 40. We have quite a few of pediatric nurse practitioners in our group. But a lot of them are planning to give up their license. For those who hold the license in Delaware, are going to give that up in 2025 because the number of hours requirement in Delaware is 400 hours. For someone who has done so much caregiving for so long, they don't want to do 400 hours for 2 years. But we are still doing a lot of good stuff in Delaware, in Sussex County. Some of the members have nursing students coming to their house to learn how to give shots. The first people that neighbors go to for advice, who do they go to? Because they just moved here, they go to the nurse who is their neighbors. That's the person they trust. However, no one is knocking on our doors to say, we want to welcome this, we want to build this reverse pipeline. I know you talked about the pipeline, but let's talk about reverse pipeline. That's my comment.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dr. Kathy Neal. I'm a PhD nurse. I teach at Widener University, but I am the president-elect of the Delaware Nurses Association. And my question is specifically for Dr. LaFasia. I'm really interested in what you're doing lower for the middle school and high school. My question is, what is Nemours doing to support them through nursing careers or other healthcare careers, and what can we as a nursing community do to help you support these students who probably need a little help getting through nursing school?
So great question, so thank you so much for that. Can you hear me? I feel like I have echo. First of all, for those that are going, so again, the first cohort that I opened up with of the 22 students that graduated high school, and 85% of them are now enrolled in nursing programs. Part of their enrollment as an employee of Nemours, they get tuition reimbursement. So they get help in terms of the financial piece. They also get mentorship, on the units. So they are working with the nurse manager, and also part of their co-op. You have to remember, they're networking that entire time. So the 9 months that they're with us, they're meeting other nurses on the unit. They're meeting the nurse managers, and they're getting great feedback. I have one of my colleagues here right now. She is in surgical services, so she'll be going with me in a couple weeks to actually go to the school, talk about her career and how she got into surgical services, and then at the same time, we then turn around, create an opportunity to bring students, and they're very interested to become a nurse like herself. So as part of that, we cultivate the two-way conversation. That many of these individuals, again, they come from homes where they don't have a lot of guidance, maybe, or even schools that don't have a lot of guidance. I don't want to say that they don't have a lot of guidance, but there's a lot of students, right? And so they don't have one-to-one mentoring and conversations about that. What can you do? So I was listening to you talk, so I'm like, my brain's going, so two things actually. My brain's going first is, let's start to create very intentional scholarships for these students as we bring them in, so that we can then pair them with the universities in our state, because we want to keep our workforce in the state of Delaware, right? We don't want them going out of the state, because once they go out of state, I don't know about you, but I'm not from Delaware, but my education brought me to Delaware, and now I'm here, right? So your education kind of takes you where you're going to go. So we want to keep our workforce in Delaware, so we have to create partnerships where we can partner for scholarships. But then the comment that you brought about the LPN to RN, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, and maybe I'm just uneducated, but my research has shown, because I have many LPNs that approach me at Nemours, and we're a Magnet hospital, and then, as you know, we have a certain quota we have to hit, that we have to have a BSN level nurses. But we have LPNs that have been in the practice for 10, 20 years that can do more than the physician coming out of school, in the moment, but they're an LPN, they want to do an LPN to RN program. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but what I have found is Del Tech Community College is the only one that has an LPN to RN track. 8 seats in Newcastle County, 12 seats down in Kent County. Think about that. That's 20 seats a year. That's it. We have many more LPNs in the state of Delaware. We need to create more LPN to RN programs. I will tell you that right now, Nemours is partnering with a university outside of Delaware in Pennsylvania for an apprenticeship exactly for an LPN to RN program. So we need to create it here in Delaware. We have this shortage, so that's something. I'll close with that. Yeah.
I love that. All right, so the message from this panel is, please recognize the medical educators in your midst, and let's elevate them and make it possible for them to teach ever more growing numbers of students and for longer years in their own career, and find it fulfilling. Thank you all. This was fantastic. Please give them a hand.